Hey and welcome to Discard. Today I'm going to talk about a few more ways that you can display your Super Nintendo cartridges in your game room or game collection. This is part 2. Let's take a look. So the first idea today was actually recommended to me by another YouTube channel, Candi's Game Shrine. I'll leave a link in the description to her channel, but this is a wallet holder. This is another great example of something having a strange use and working great for retro games or just games in general. This display is made out of clear acrylic, and I found that it works fantastic for displaying Super Nintendo games along with a bunch of other games like boxed games and other types of cartridges. I will say that I did try this with boxed Super Nintendo games, and it turns out it doesn't quite fit into the groove for those boxed Super Nintendo games, but you could easily lean them on top of it and it would work still as a stand for them. Some of the biggest pros of this item are going to be that you can use it for many different things in your game collection, use it for a ton of different cartridges and different ideas that you have, but at the same time it's also taking up a very limited amount of space from your collection, so you'll still have more room on that shelf to display other items or even get more of these to line them up and display a bunch of different things. But overall, I really like this item and I would definitely recommend checking it out and seeing if it'll work for you. The next display idea is actually from a company called Retro Fools on Etsy, and they make some of these tray style stands for a few different retro games that are out there. This Super Nintendo stand works great because it's just a simple thin tray for your cartridges, and it takes up minimal space and will allow you to really pack a bunch of things into your shelf. Retro Fools stands are definitely 3D printed, and there's definitely some variations in this item. I noticed that the bottom piece of this was actually a little bit warped, but it is elastic, so when you do put in your Super Nintendo cartridges, it doesn't matter much and it all kind of lays flat. But for the most part, it's a pretty low profile stand that's not going to take up too much space. And when you put your cartridges in there, the only part of the stand you're going to see is the two little prongs at the front. So that's kind of a big deal to me. I like to see more of the games than I do the stand, and that's a huge plus. So Retro Fools has a pretty simple design that looks good on the shelf. It's just plain and simple, a good display idea. Every once in a while I come across kind of a strange idea for displaying games, and in this case it's a coffee or tea condiment organizer. When I see an item like this, I always wonder if it's going to display different cartridges, and I found that this one worked fantastic for Super Nintendo games. This organizer is made entirely out of acrylic. It has 3 tiers on it for putting Super Nintendo games and 2 slots on the top, which you can either put Super Nintendo games in sideways or some of your controllers. The slots on this are pretty deep and you can fit a ton of Super Nintendo cartridges into this. You can also fit your cartridges sideways or horizontal, depending on how you want to display them. One of the cons of this item is if you do have a Super Nintendo game that you want to get to that's in the back of one of these slots, it might be a little tricky to get it out because there's that other tier above it. But this display capitalizes on vertical space, so if you had a countertop or some other place that you could put this on top of the surface, it would work fantastic for taking up some of that vertical space, so you would have more of your horizontal space to use for displaying other items in your game collection. I will actually be using this in my living room next to my television to hold some of the cartridges that I'll be playing for the majority of the time. And I think it works great for something like that. But as a display, I think it works really well for Super Nintendo games. It has a really high quality design to it, and I think it would work in most game rooms or game collections. Another display that I talk about quite a bit are these displays from Play Retro Gaming on Etsy. Their displays are some of the best examples of a tiered display, but with a minimalist design. Play Retro Gaming 3D prints these and has a high attention to detail while they're designing them and also outputting these. Every tier on these stands has a little clip at the top that will attach to the board of each one of your cartridges. And this allows it to kind of have this floating effect with your cartridges and have them be the most important thing when it comes to your display. For the most part, the only part of this stand that you're going to be seeing is the part that is at the footing of it, which they do come in black or white, and you can kind of blend that into whatever your shelving is or whatever countertop you'll be putting this on. And of course, one of my favorite things about displays is when they work for different cartridges in a game collection, so I don't have to really commit to using it for Super Nintendo cartridges. And this is no exception to that. It will actually work for NES, Super Nintendo, N64, Famicom, Super Famicom, Genesis, and Master System, and that's just a whole huge lot of different cartridges that this would work great for. These stands have a huge value, look great on the shelf, and also take up very minimal space, so it's definitely well worth looking into single play and seeing if they're right for your collection. And the last idea today comes from a company called MadSunshine Creations. And this stand in particular is for Super Nintendo cartridges, and they do come in 2 different designs, 4 to 6 count, depending on what you want, and you can also choose the colors for it. I personally went with what they were showing on their page, which was a red design with gray lettering, and I think that looked awesome for the Super Nintendo cartridges. It just really pops on there. Another cool thing about this is that the Super Nintendo lettering on the front actually is raised a little bit. So it's just an extra detail that makes it that much more awesome. A great use for this, and what I use it for, is putting it out front of my Super Nintendo games and just putting the games in it that I know I'll be getting to soon. But really, I think this is a pretty sleek design for a Super Nintendo cartridge tray. I really like the color pop when it's on the shelf. It really makes it stand out, and I think that's pretty cool. MadSunshine Creations seems to be making a bunch of different displays for different things in your game collection, so I'll definitely be looking more into them in the future to check those out after looking at the quality of this one. So thanks for coming to checking out Discard today. If you have any other ideas on how to display Super Nintendo games in your game room or game collection, please let me know in the comments below. I'm always looking for more ideas. If you want to help out Discard past the subscription, please check out patreon.com/discard and check out all the awesome stuff you can get for $2 a month. If you like this video, please leave a like. If you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe. But otherwise, have a great day. Collect what you love.